Hey, what is up, guys? It is time to start another stream. So, for today, what I have for you guys is we're going to be going over some of the Championship 7 decks. I'm going to go ahead and craft a handful of them. And if we've got a little bit of time, I might play one or two. As the title suggests, we will be having the podcast, or I will be doing the podcast live, and the podcast will be posted later on. Can't remember the name of the podcast. I think it's called Mythic Rare Podcast, but I can't exactly remember, so I didn't bother leaving that in the title. But yeah, so a lot of really interesting lists here to look at, but one of the lists that I thought was the most interesting was by far the Rakdos Fires deck, if I can find it here. There it is. So it is called the Mythic Rare Podcast. My bad, man. I didn't know you'd be on. So I did guess it right. Nice. So this was the list that I thought was the most interesting. Like, there are a lot of lists out there where people just kind of went with what the meta suggested. And there's a handful of lists here where people built off of something that's just meta. But I think the most interesting deck was this, and then the Esper control list, but I don't think the Esper control list was very good. But this list, you know, this guy had to actually come up with this list. It has a lot of staples, as you would imagine, but a lot of people just would not think Covetous Urge. I mean, nobody would imagine, but the thing is about Covetous Urge is you can steal a card and then immediately play it. It's like the anti of that other card that allows you to look into your sideboard and play it immediately as well. So I thought that was cool. But the other cool thing about this deck that nobody really, well, I'm sure some people have thought about it, but if you go all in on Fires of Invention, you could go ahead and drop your Bontu and then get rid of every land down to 5. Because you don't need lands except for 5 because of the Cavalier and the Bontu. In fact, you could probably even go down to 3 if you've kind of given up on the idea of playing Cavalier. Or maybe 4 if you want to try and get that Covetous Urge. But the thing is, you can definitely come back from a really bad situation. And also, I think it's kind of encouraging you to sack your lands a little bit because of the fact that there's 26 lands in the deck, which seems awfully high for a deck that, I mean, yes, it does have 8 5-drops and 6 4-drops, but this 4-drop isn't really to be played on turn 4, ever, unless it's like following a Fires. So, it's not necessarily about an extreme amount of late game. Cavalier works with the land sack. Oh, that is a good call there, A-Knight. I didn't even think about that. So what A-Knight just pointed out is Cavalier's last effect here. When Cavalier Flame dies, it deals X damage to each opponent and each planeswalker they control, where X is the number of land cards in your graveyard. So you could use Cavalier to dump lands from your hand. You could use Bontu to dump lands from the board. And gives yourself alternative win conditions. So you got Midnight Reaper, get you extra draws on some of these other cards here. Not a lot of life gain in this deck other than the Cauldron Familiar. But you're going to have to watch your life total when you play this. You're probably going to be in the driver's seat when it comes to being the more aggressive deck. So you probably don't need to worry about taking hits from players, but the Stormfist can hurt you, the Midnight Reaper can hurt you. Aren't there, I think there's also, yeah, and the Blood Crypt can also hurt you. So you do have to pay attention to the life total here. It's not the easiest to deal with, but if you get your combos to work off. But the thing is, you got the Stormfist Crusader, you got the Midnight Reaper. That's a lot of extra draw power early on in the game. I can imagine having those 2 cards specifically will get you to your Fires of Invention a lot faster. Angel would like me to point out that they do, in fact, have 3 life gain lands in the deck. I'm sure it's another offset for the life loss. And I'm not totally against the life gain life gain lands in this deck just because of the fact it's got tripled red devotion with Cavalier. It's got double black devotion to God's Bantu. And there has been a lot of situations where I was playing the white-red Angels deck back in the day, and you were able to get Lyra consistently out on turn 5, sure, but getting, let's say, Resplendent Angel out on turn 3 wasn't very consistent. And a lot of the time, I kid you not, I would get 4 red lands and I wouldn't even be able to play Lyra on 5. So I mean, it does help a little bit there. With fires not needed. Oh yeah, there is that too. When you've got Fires of Invention out already on the board, land entering tapped isn't as big of a deal. But the thing I just like about this deck the most is because you've got the Crusader, you've got the Midnight Reaper, you've got the Fabled Passage, you're going to go through your deck. You're going to mill your deck rather fast. And you've also got the Cavalier and the Bantu, which can go through even more cards as well. So I think this deck is it's a drawing machine where you can get to what you need very quickly. One of the things that you could quote-unquote need here is Witch's Oven, Cauldron Familiar, Mayhem Devil, as everyone already knows is a pretty big combo. But there's always, you can get more copies of Witch's Oven, you can get more copies of Cauldron Familiar, which also just helps you break down your opponent turn by turn very quickly. But I think this deck is very unique. And it may not be totally different from some of the other Fires lists out here, but the thing is, it mixes Fires and it mixes the Rakdos Sacrifice choices, and I think that's really nice. It's a unique deck, to say the least. A lot of these other decks are just building on what everybody already knew. Azorius Control definitely had a bit of success in some of our tournaments. I didn't really think you would come out with 3 decks here, but considering one Ben Stark is playing it, it must be on the rise, or at least he's trying it out to see if he can get some traction on it. I thought this Esper control list was also very unique, but the problem with this Esper control list is just all the one-ofs and the lack of consistency with Drown in the Lock, because the fact your Duress and your Thought Eraser are just not going to really mill your opponents very fast. And because you're also running Hero and Elite Guard Mage, there's just, it doesn't really have an identity. Like, you're kind of running, I mean, I don't know, I can't see the identity of the deck. I think it might have something to do with the Bolas Citadel, just trying to maximize on, but I think the overall thing what this guy is trying to do is see if he can find a nice combination between Kenrith and Bolas Citadel, because if you get the Kenrith off on the board and then you get your Bolas Citadel the following turn, you can just gain at minimum 10 life a turn. So basically you'd be able to play anything other than 2 lands in a row. So I think that is the identity of this deck. I would be very interested to see how this deck evolves over time. I think somebody who's a really good deck builder might take over this list and make it a little bit better. I could see, I don't like the Hero in here. I don't like the Drown and Lock in here. But I'm sure that, I think maybe they went with Drown and Lock because you could also destroy creatures on the board. So you could still keep on chugging with the Bolas Citadel out. Well, I don't know all of the pros' names, but maybe the decision for the Drown in the Lock was because you might be able to play the Drown in the Lock off the top of your deck and kill a 1 or 2 converted mana cross creature on your opponent's side, and that way you can keep on chugging through the top of the deck. I'm not really sure, but I feel like this deck, because of all the one-ofs in it, it just doesn't have an identity. Okay, well, I wasn't aware that everybody there was a pro. I think some people earn their spots, but regardless, I think this guy, just on I feel like just all the one-ofs, this guy probably doesn't even know the identity of the deck yet, or maybe he just hasn't had a lot of play testing with it. But the lack of consistency, it scares me. I couldn't back this deck. I would give it a few games to test it out, but I just can't imagine how good it would be. I mean, I could be wrong. That guy could win. For some people, it's their first competitive tournament. That's what I thought too, because I know that you can earn your way into this tournament. I can't imagine every single person here is a pro. I mean, there's a lot of pros I obviously know the name of, like Seth Mansfield, Javier Dominguez, Brad Nelson, Brian Branduin, Mike Sturgis, Matt Nass, Shahar Shenhar, Gabriel Nassif. I know Autumn Burchett. She's, I think, new. Or Burkett, Ben Stark. Yeah, I mean, I know a handful of the names. Some people like Mogwai just got invited. Yeah, I know exactly. I know there's a handful of streamers that are like that. From my understanding, though, I think none of the streamers made it very far, but I think one of them made it decently far, but I can't remember which Mythic Championship it was. Someone made it to like the top 4 and lost. That was a streamer, not a pro. But either way, I like some of these other names. I also recognize some of these names, like Reed Duke from the from that Thursday tournament every week. But yeah, can't wait to talk about some of these decks. I find the one-ofs to be the most interesting. I like to consider pro as in it's like your sole job. Like if you're a pro, you don't have a side job as well. But that's just my definition. I'm sure it's not the actual definition. But regardless, I mean, the thing is, I'm sure plenty of these people are pros. I just don't recognize the names. I haven't been around the Magic community that long. I have been around it for, well, I've been looking up lists and whatnot for a long time, but as far as looking into big people, then there are no Magic pros by your definition. Well, aren't there people who make like on the pro tour who make like 90 grand and that's all they do is play Magic? I mean, I can't imagine they're doing side hustles. I mean, obviously Twitch is, you could be a pro and still do Twitch. They all write articles. They really make that much from just articles? I wouldn't imagine they would make a whole lot. I mean, if it was... Wow, I wasn't aware of that. Interesting. But yeah, the most... I forget which one of these two lists that I wanted to see the most. I'm a very big... what's it called? I'm a very big supporter. Oh yeah, they were both exactly the same. I'm a very big supporter of the Izzet Flash deck. That's the one I like the most. Wizards pays them like $75 or 75 G's salary plus appearance fees. That's pretty nice. Let's see. So we've got, I mean, I like this deck. I think the Scorching Dragonfire is like mind blown. I mean, I didn't really consider this. I really just figured, everyone would go with the regular Shock. And I still think Shock may be the better choice in this deck, but the Scorching Dragonfire definitely was an interesting choice. Now, I really like the Flame Sweep in the sideboard. I really feel like when I played this in the tournament, that I didn't have enough for mass removal in the version that I was using, but the Ember Cleave is what really shocked me with this list. I didn't honestly predict that Ember Cleave would even be a factor or even a choice in this deck, but I'm having a difficult time knowing what matchup you play the Embercleave in. I can't imagine. I mean, I guess you would probably play it against some sort of control matchup. That way, every single creature you drop could essentially be like life or death for the opponent. But I'm not totally sure if that's how the Embercleave is supposed to be played in this deck. But everything else seems pretty normal for the deck. You got the 4 copies of Ionize. You got the... Well, I run the 4 copies of Quench in mine, but 2 Negates is pretty standard. The Rawl's Outburst I'm not a huge fan of. But then again, when I played in my own tournament with this deck, I faced a lot of UG Flash decks as well. So it was like a cat and mouse game between me and my opponent. So this card just seemed to be dead because it was the easiest to counter. It was like countering a 2-for-1. You counter 4 mana, you counter 3 damage, and you counter the draw card. So I mean, obviously it was a really easy target for the opponent to get rid of. I also found it very difficult to use this card because of the fact that my opponents would have a 4/4 wolf on the board, and this doesn't necessarily kill the 4/4 wolf. I'm not really sure what card was such a big deal to get rid of that they needed to go with Scorching Dragonfire over Shock, but I guess I'm just gonna have to think about it. Maybe they went with the Scorching Dragonfire because of the exile, and there's a lot of decks out there where you get your cards back from the grave. I'm not sure. I know theoretically you could use this. Oh, okay. I think I know now. You could use the Scorching Dragonfire on any of these sacrifice. Oh, I mean, Mayhem Devil is a good call. I think it's for Cauldron Familiar, though. If I were to take a guess, I would imagine it was for Cauldron Familiar the most. But because of, let's see, I think it was the Golgari deck, Golgari Adventure decks, any of them, it would not be totally bad to take the Innkeeper because the opponent's getting Order of Midnight to get their Innkeepers back. So getting rid of Innkeeper by exiling it would not be necessarily a bad choice. But yeah, I think maybe Mayhem Devil might have also been in consideration as well, because I know Mayhem Devil tears this deck up if it hits the board, because it's very difficult to get off the board once it hits the board. So that's probably a good call. But this list is like one of my all-time favorites right now. Let's see. I thought the 5-color decks were dramatically different from each other. I thought that was really cool. One list goes in the direction of a... I mean, it is technically 5 colors, but it seems to go more along the lines in the direction of Niv Mizzet. Because we got double color here, we got double color there, double color, double color, double color. So, I mean, Niv Mizzet can do a whole lot. I really like somebody bringing the Niv Mizzet deck to the tournament. I don't think it'll do all that well, but I absolutely commend this guy for bringing it. I mean, anyone with the gall to play Niv Mizzet Reborn is cool in my book. I got 4 Niv Mizzet decks myself, and I love all of them. And this guy went with the more casual 5-color deck with the Golos, Hydroid Krasis, whatever. But he took it a little step further and went with the Agent of Treachery, Kendrith, and I guess Beanstalk Giant for maybe more consistency, because this guy's running a lot of colors here, and Casualties of War definitely requires some consistency when it comes to land, as well as Time Wipe. I mean, you can't necessarily play Casualties of War and Time Wipe without requiring a lot of pivotal dual lands. So I don't know if this list will go very far, and I'm only thinking about it from the point of view of you don't get the fires, but You know, this list definitely, it screams value to me. Because you get a lot of value off the Golos, the Hydroid Krasis, and the Casualties of War. So there's a lot of things going for the deck. I think the interesting thing, though, is the sideboard. I don't really understand all the sideboard. Just because well, no, I do understand it. It seems to counter a little bit of everything. And since the meta is so diverse, it's probably a good idea to have a little bit of everything countered. Because I noticed a lot of people, like, in the last tournament, or just in all the tournaments of late, people would just play against one deck, since one deck may have been like 50% of the meta at the time. Ooh, perfect. I just noticed the cat caught over there. The Tolsimir is the only weird one to me. I'm sure it has its uses. I'm just not aware of the uses. Maybe the Tolsimir is supposed to get rid of like a Mayhem Devil or something. I feel like there's other uses to get rid of maybe Mayhem Devil and whatnot. I like how Return to Nature has become a thing because of all of the sacrifice decks, that Witch's Oven is popular enough of a card to run Return to Nature. But also because of the adventure decks. Let me go ahead and grab one here. Hopefully it's using it. It is not. Oh, there it is. The Great Henge. The Great Henge has now become a thing. So if your artifacts have become... Well, then again, what enchantments are great right now? Oh, obviously. Fires of Invention. Yeah, obviously Fires of Invention is the enchantment right now getting all the love. So, because of the dual usage of the card, getting rid of both Fires and or Witch's Oven, it makes the card pretty good in the sideboard to run. Let's see, what else do we got here? Boy, I'm really hoping that podcast starts soon. Running on fumes. I think it's cool to see the return of Simic Ramp. I actually haven't taken a look at the list. Interesting. Endrazor Forerunner. I guess that's good when you've got all of these other creatures out on the board already. Quasi-duplicate. Okay, I can understand that. Finale of Devastation can grab the Endrazor Forerunner and possibly go for lethal, because even Leafkin Druid becomes good at that point because of the Endrazor Forerunner giving +2/2 trample, as well as the Finale giving +10/10. So it is a cool card here, and Andrea Mengucci is a really good... I mean, I've followed that person's stream. Well, I did for a little while. I haven't for quite some time now, but I recognize that person's really good. Let's see, what else am I to say here? So I mean, obviously we've got Quasi-Duplicate for Agent of Treachery and Cavalier of Thorns. That seems pretty good to me. Obviously you want your 4 copies of Hydroid Krasis. That's also very good. Alright, I think that's about it for this deck. I like the Shifting Ceratops. I feel like Shifting Ceratops has made a slight comeback because of the Izzet and Simic flash decks. Since they can't be countered, it's a really good piece to a lot of these green decks to give it an advantage in those matchups. Alright, well, I think I've ran out of things to say, so I'm going to go ahead and try out that Rakdos Fires deck that I mentioned earlier. I already imported it. I'm not sure if it's good enough for ranked, but we can go ahead and just play it in quick play. Just try them out. Well, I mean, this deck has nothing going for it. I mean, I can't imagine having my first real card being on turn 5. Alright, I guess that's better. Let's see. I've got black. I don't necessarily need red, but I don't really need a turn 1 play at the moment anyway, so I can just play the Bloodfell Caves. Or Steam. Well, no, let's go with Bloodfell Caves. Oh, nice. So that decision to go with Bloodfell Cave is really nice. No, you have not missed the podcast. It just has not started yet. Well, that's a kind of a bummer, but okay. Spellbreaker, okay. Go with 4, that makes sense. Unfortunately, the Spellbreaker has trample, so I can't just do the block and sack. Oh, Brontodon, great. Obviously, he's just gonna blow up the Witch's Oven. So, well, isn't that interesting? Alright, I have already gotten 1 blue, 1 red, 2 black. I guess we'll just go with another red here. Looks like we got plenty of black sources. Guess we can go with Bontu, and then sack our Witch's Oven if necessary. Oh. Hello.
Hey.
Hello.
Oh, wait. Gotta turn my video on. Okay, waiting for... Are we all in right now? I see you, Nerdy Steve.
Yep. I think we're all good.
I cannot see... I can't see MTG Arena Steve
Oh,
right now.
yeah, hold on. Let me do that.
Yep. Okay, sweet. There we go.
Okay, sure. I just turned it off and on again. I guess that's all.
Yeah, that's all it took. You're still loading, but like it actually... Oh, never mind. That's not all it took. Sorry, I went...
I think it's because the stream is using the webcam.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, that's fine with me. Yeah, so I know you just got into that game with Rakdos. I was watching your stream earlier. That's a fun deck. That's what I've been playing the last night or so.
Yeah, I just wish I wasn't getting destroyed right now.
Fair enough. Unfortunately, Steve, I kind of agreed with like literally every single thing that you said when you were going over those decks on your stream earlier. I was hoping to disagree with you somewhere in there, but I think if you're cool with just recapping some of what you already did, I think that could be a good place to start.
Well, yeah, you could just bring up a deck and ask questions about it while you're going down the list in whatever order you want.
Yeah, sure. That sounds good. All right, I'm about to start recording on my end. I'll just do like a really quick intro because I know you're live right now, and then we'll get this going. All right.
Oh,
Right,
I
everyone,
see.
welcome
There we
to
go.
a live episode of the Mythic Rare podcast. We're joined by the Nerdy Steve. He's been killing it on A for Hub tournaments recently, and I think the guy has been dominating the meta, I would say. I think it's good to have you on. And also, I want to give a get well soon to your cat, Darwin.
Thank you.
We're all rooting for a recovery without really knowing the issue. But
Thank you.
yep. And then we're also joined by the host of the A4 Hub tournaments, MTG Arena Meta Steve. So we got two Steves here, which is a little confusing, but that's all right. We'll power through. But how you guys doing tonight?
I'm doing quite well.
Me too. I'm having iced coffee, so I'm happy.
There you go. Yeah, so Steve, you were recording earlier, but you kind of mentioned the deck you were most interested in. It's also the deck that I was kind of most interested in, which is the Rakdos Fires deck, which is pretty innovative brew. It's kind of just like he took the Rakdos Sacrifice deck and Fires deck and just combined the two to make one. But one of the interesting cards that you were talking about earlier, Steve, is Covetous Urge, which is a card that I don't think I've ever seen in competitive play before, but is pretty sweet in this deck when you can play it and when you can steal your opponent's card and play that card in the same turn with Fires out. But do you guys think this is a little too janky, or do you think it's like actually has a chance to be competitive? We can start with you, Nerdy Steve.
So we're talking about the Rakdos Fires list by John Rolfe.
Yeah, correct.
Right. I like it. I have yet to play with Covetous Urge.
Yeah,
So
I don't blame you.
I mean, but it seems like that's really, really good in the Mirror or the Fires matchups. And there's a lot of those decks going around, so I think whatever you can get to be ahead in that matchup is really, really good.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good point because if you're in a mirror match, you can steal their Fires if you're on the play. So that can be pretty helpful too. Yeah, my experience, it's like felt really good when it's been good, and it's felt really bad when it's been bad, if that makes any sense.
Oh, it makes all the sense in the world.
Because it's got the one turn kill potential of having Mayhem Devil down and then doing like 10 damage with a God Eternal Bontu. But then it also has the potential to get nothing going whatsoever and get totally railroaded. So I don't know. Are you playing a game with that right now, Steve?
I just finished up. I got wrecked, but I like the theory of this deck. It's a lot of those. I'm not a very good deck builder. The people in my stream know that I'm not a very good deck builder. But anytime a new set comes out, I build decks kind of like this, where I put too much thought in card advantage. So like this deck, it has the Stormfist Crusader, it's got the Midnight Reaper, but the thing is, if you can't get something going, that's not gonna do anything for you, unfortunately. And so it just borders on the line of too much jank.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you there. The Midnight Reaper actually works pretty well with God Eternal Bontu, which I have noticed is a neat piece of tech. But yeah, I'm rooting for this guy, but I'm not incredibly confident in it.
I mean, what's interesting is you have a Fires deck with Midnight Reaper and Stormfist Crusader. So you're going to be drawing a lot of cards, but then you can't use them.
Right. Yeah.
But maybe that's the point because you're going for a Mayhem Reaper combo with God Eternal Bontu.
Yep.
So I don't know.
I think there's also, you got to note that there's 26 lands in this deck, and the highest card here is 5 mana. So I think there's like a decent emphasis on getting Fires of Invention out at all costs. So it's got the Cavalier Flame to try and burn through more of those cards. Like it's let's get our 5 lands out and try and Cavalier our hand away to get a Fires, or it puts so much emphasis in Fires.
So I got a question for you guys because someone on your chat mentioned this earlier, and I didn't even think of this when I was playing. So if you have the Cavalier of Flame down, and then you play a God Eternal Bontu, and you sacrifice all your lands and the Cavalier of Flame, will that Cavalier of Flame effect should go into play, right, where it deals damage for all the lands in your graveyard? Yeah, so that is actually pretty nifty if you can pull that off. But that's obviously not the most common situation to be in.
I haven't done it yet, but from my understanding, you probably would need to rearrange the order of the effects. Like if you had the Cavalier go off before, like let's say the land sacks, then you would miss the opportunity for the damage. I'm not
Yeah,
really
I
sure.
think if when you cast the Bond 2, and if you sacrifice all your other permanents, that will, once everything is sacrificed, that will then trigger the Cavalier when it dies, and then we'll see all the lands in your graveyard.
Okay.
Gotcha. Yeah, that is a pretty cool piece of tech. Hopefully, we get to see that this weekend. The other kind of interesting Fires deck, though, that I actually think is a little bit better, but I haven't got a chance to play with it yet, so I don't know for sure, is the Jun Fires deck by Elizabeth Rice. Um, this is a very interestingly constructed deck, I think, because all of the creatures in the deck are Gruul, red-green, and then all the spells except for Fires of Invention are Golgari, green-black. So it's kind of an interesting, except for the sideboard, it's a little bit different, but kind of an interesting way to construct the deck. But I like having cards like Biogenic Ooze and Questing Beast and Cavalier Flame all together. I don't even know exactly how those all play out, but I just like that they're included.
Just put yourself in this situation. You've gotten 6 mana, it's turn 6. You've gotten your Fires of Invention out already. You put your Cavalier, or you put your Biogenic Ooze out last turn. This turn, you're now playing Cavalier Flame. You spend 4 mana to make another Ooze token. You play your Cavalier Flame, and then you haste it all. Oh, it's just beautiful.
Yeah, that's pretty big.
I really like this deck too because I like having Casualties of War in my Fire deck because Casualties of War I think is one of the best cards in a Fires environment. So I really, really like it.
Yeah, what do you guys think about that being the highest played non-land card, I believe?
I think it went
did not
from...
see that one coming, but it's good.
Sorry about that.
Yeah,
I think it went from a sideboard card to a main board card because of how good it's been performing lately.
It's fantastic.
I'm assuming you've been playing that card because you've been playing Golgari Adventures in the Averhub tournament decks.
Yeah,
Nerdy
and
Steve.
Casualties of War is just good against everything.
I've
Right.
watched Nerdy Steve. I've watched a few other people when my games are already over. And I gotta tell you, that Casualties of War card is wicked good. It fits in anything Golgari. It fits in anything Fires of Invention. Like, you just can't go wrong with it.
So what's like the best case situation for it? Do you think you can kill a Fires of Invention, a Witch's Oven in some matchups? Like, what do you think is the best time where you can get the most value out of it?
Oh, I've had it 5-for-1 against a Cat Oven
Nice.
deck with Trail of Crumbs and a Vraska out. So you can get a creature, Trail, Oven, land, and a Planeswalker. And that makes me happy.
Yeah. Yeah, that is pretty good.
Ooh, and I think that card really matches up well with some of these. I don't know how popular they've been of lately. I just kind of saw them recently pop up, but the Jun sacrifice decks, more specifically the Brian Branduin one, because it's the most consistent one because it's got 4 of everything. It's just interesting that it's got enchantment, artifact, obviously land, creatures. I mean, it's got literally everything. So I mean, that card specifically just owns this deck.
But what I like about Brian's deck is I don't know how many have 4 Corvold.
Yeah, I
But
was just
for-
thinking that.
None.
Corvold is, I think, whenever I play against Corvold, I always cry because it's the best card ever. So I think having 4 of him is going to be really, really good.
I love any deck that just has 4 of everything. It just
Yeah, it's easy.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah, it's funny because Brian has a podcast that he does, and I could be wrong in this, but I remember like 2 weeks ago he was talking about how much he didn't like Corvold, and now he's playing 4 copies of it. So can tell you how easily your mind can change in this game. But what Jun Sacrifice, is that the second most popular deck? Is that right? After, I think it is. Jeskai Fires is 1. I'm pretty sure Jun Sacrifice is the second most. So that is it's a cool deck. It's just great how much different archetypes there are compared to last time when you go from a 70% meta to a 17% meta for the top deck is pretty impressive. But Steve, another deck you were talking about in your stream that I think is really good is it Flash? If we can move over to that one.
So this is the deck that I had a lot of success with. Unfortunately, I didn't do well enough to play against the Nerdy Steve, but I did do well. I think I placed somewhere around 5th in like an 80-person tournament.
That's pretty good. Were you playing the 4 copies of Gadwick?
Yes, I was.
Is there ever a situation where you put that down for just 3 mana, just for the tab effect, not even to draw
all
the
the
cards?
time? But let's be honest, it never stayed on the board for more than one whole turn.
Fair enough.
People never gave it a shot.
Yeah. I know you were talking about this, but I love the Embercleave in the sideboard as a concept, but I just am not totally sure what matchup this is for, like you were saying.
Yeah, that shocked me. I mean, maybe Steve knows, but I mean, the Embercleave in the sideboard just seems so out of place.
Right. And Skargan Hellguide a little bit for me too. But
I understand the Hellkite just from a aggro standpoint, because the Hellkite can counter a lot of the smaller creatures, and the name of the game with the Flash deck is being able to play something. If you're not playing, let's say, an Opt, and you don't really have a Rawls Outburst or something you can get value at the end of the turn, being able to spend 4 mana on the Hellkite is always a thing.
Yeah, that's true. What do you think that Embercleave could be for, Nerdy Steve?
I'm trying to think against Embercleave is really good against cat decks, right? Because and I don't know how the cat matchup is, so maybe an Embercleave as a way to just get through the cat blocker so you can deal all that extra damage. Maybe that's a problem, but I don't play the Izzet Flash deck enough to know.
Sure.
But it looks like, that could be a good sideboard option if because your counter spells aren't that great against cat decks because they come in so low.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe that's it. I don't know.
You're absolutely right. Now that you point that out, I have played this deck against a lot of cat decks, and one of the things that infuriates me the most is the Bone Crusher Giant just being blocked and then not doing anything.
Yeah. Do you think it's better, or do you think it's designed more for the Brineborn Cutthroat? If you can boost that up really just an absurd amount and they can't remove it, then you can swing in for 15 damage in one turn, or more just for the consistency of the Bone Crusher Giant?
I think it's just more along the lines of to help you get over that wall, just to help you get that win. Because I mean, I feel more often than not, it's not going to go on the Cutthroat. It's more often than not going to go on the Brazen Burrower.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. Actually, yeah, because it's got flying, so that's 8 damage in, so that is pretty good. But yeah, so I guess another. I'm sorry to double back on all the ones you were going over in your stream, Steve, but you kind of went over all the ones I thought was interesting too. Azorius Control is a deck that I was surprised to see 3 copies of, but also Stan Sifka posted on Twitter, and he's kind of a master deck builder, that I think he said that if he could do it again, he would have chose this deck over what he ended up going with, or something like that. So how does this one win? Is it just that it will counter all the important cards like Fires of Invention and then eventually tempo you out with Brazen Borrower? Because the copy I'm looking at now doesn't appear to be running Mass Manipulation, which is what kind of the older version used to be playing.
Yeah, I think this deck just wins by pissing off the opponent to death.
That's one way to do it.
Because unlike previous versions of Azorius Control that had big Teferi and the win condition can just straight up be -8, this deck still has to hit the opponent with the Brazen Burrower and the Gadwick. It doesn't have a whole lot of other ways to win.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too.
So the Azorius deck is what I might be playing the next time I play in the Standard Tournament.
Nice.
I really, really like it. The one version that isn't running Mass Manipulation is running Finale of Revelation, and that's a way to reset the board. If you wait until you have 12 mana, you just get back everything again, and you win with your Castle Ardenvale. So it's a very, very long, slow process, but your Planner Cleansing gets rid of all the ovens and all that stuff. So you'll be able, once you have your lands and your mana advantage, you're good to go. It's just getting to that point is very difficult sometimes.
So do you think this is better than the Golgari decks if you're thinking about moving over to it, or do you just want to try something new?
I like it because it really fits my play style, and I love counter spells at heart because I'm that type of person. But Teferi obviously is a very, very powerful card,
Right.
and he just, I don't know, I just love him. And Brazen Borrower, this deck really, really uses Brazen Borrower to a really, really good advantage because if you miss your counter spells, you can always bounce something and then counter it later, which, a lot of blue-white control decks, once it was on the battlefield, you had to deal with it. But now, like, the early permanents like Witch's Oven and stuff like that isn't that much of a problem, and you don't lose your card advantage because then you have a 3/1 that can kill a Planeswalker at the end of turn.
Gotcha. If you had to guess like how long a typical best of 3 game with this deck takes, what would you say?
I tend to play very, very quickly, so I
Okay.
never run out of time. But these games, specifically a mirror, will take literal forever.
Yeah.
If it's anything like old Dovin's Acuity, it literally could take 50 minutes a game.
Yeah, and there's a time limit in this tournament, so we expect some draws maybe with that. I don't know exactly how getting a draw works in terms of advancing to day 2, but I know there was actually a lot of draws in the last tournament, and that was more so because the food mirrors take forever. But if we're going to see them from anyone, I think it'll be this deck. Okay, one person we have to talk about is our guy, Alexander Stayer. He's an Aether Hub guy. He goes by the name of Sorkis, and he actually qualified for the Mythic Championship, which is awesome. He's playing Jeskai Fires, which is kind of obviously the most popular deck. But he tweaked it in a version that's a little bit different from some people, kind of, because he's playing basically 3 copies of every single creature. And he's also playing the Fae of Wishes package with the one of sideboard, basically. And he mentioned in Discord that he was a little uncertain about this deck. But what do you guys think? Did he tweak it right, or do you think kind of the other Fires decks might have got it a little better?
Love how this sideboard just has an Embercleave, because why not?
Yeah, I know. Put that on Sphinx of Foresight, though. Or, well, I guess actually he's got a lot of big creatures in here. But...
Only one deck has main deck Embercleave. The rest have them in their sideboard.
Yeah. What's that, the Gruul aggro deck, I'm guessing?
Yeah, I think by autumn.
Yeah, okay.
So
But could you imagine dying to a Fae of Wishes with Embercleave on it? I don't know if I could live with that.
So the weird thing is, this guy went with only 3 copies of Cavalier Flame. The thing about this deck is it relies so heavily on Cavalier Flame just kind of getting through unblocked and getting a win. So that baffles me a little bit. But I mean, I guess the Sphinx, it definitely works because, I mean, the cool thing about the Jeskai Fires deck with the castle, you can always put a stopper at the beginning of your turn and castle Vantress for an answer because
Sure.
you know the mana is irrelevant. So that's always a thing. And I think the Sphinx helps make it a little bit more consistent. I also like how the Sphinx gives you the Scry 3 at the beginning. And if you... I haven't actually played with it. I assume you're dealt your cards and then obviously you scry right at the start. And I guess then you've got the decision, hey, do I have a Fires Invention or do I not? And then it's like, if the answer is no, let's just dump all 3. So now instead of looking at 7 cards, I'm looking at 1/6 of my deck.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of people are playing 4 of that, actually, which is something that's changed a lot. Do you guys think 4 would be better than 3, or would it not even matter because it's just a 1-card difference?
I know I don't play Jeskai Fires a lot, but I know a lot of people who do, and the Sphinx is really, really important because of your getting Fires on 4 is really important. So a lot of them have Sphinx at a higher priority than a lot of other cards because if that's going to be part of your game plan, right, then you want it. But this deck also has two main deck Ether Gust, so maybe like that is taking the spot of some of the other cards
Yeah,
because
I think
they're
so.
prioritizing Ether Gust as a preemptive sideboard plan rather than having Sphinx, which might be the way to go.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a good point that he probably anticipated that Fires of Invention was going to be one of the more popular decks. So he got the A for Gust to kind of deal with an opponent's Fires of Invention. Slows him down for a turn, I guess, which can make a big difference. Would you guys have expected this to be the most popular deck, or were you surprised by that at all?
No, I wasn't surprised at all. I think the last, like, even when Oko wasn't banned, this deck was very popular.
Hmm.
And that's when I liked playing it, when Oko was still a thing. And now that Oko's not a thing, I expected this deck to blow up. And it may be the most popular, but I expected it to be more than, like, 20%.
Yeah. Well, it's at 17, close to 18% of the meta right now. But there's actually not, there's more MPL players playing the Jund Sacrifice deck than this deck, which I thought was kind of interesting. Um, I don't know if that means anything per se, but it's there's a lot more challengers playing Jeskai Fires than the MPLers.
I think it means one thing. Since I haven't seen the sacrifice deck firsthand, and so many people are playing it, that deck is sleeping. Like, people
Yeah,
just don't know how good it is. Because the only reason so many people would play one deck is because in their play tests, it was really good. So I think we're going to see a lot of good things happen with that deck.
yeah.
I
A
agree.
lot of them, a lot of them play test together too, so it's no surprise when a bunch of guys that know each other end up playing the same deck. Um, However, kind of Brad Nelson and Brian Braun-Duin, they live in the same house. They usually play the same decks, but they actually went different routes here. Brian Braun-Duin playing Jund Sacrifice. Brad Nelson is playing this Simic Flash deck that doesn't run Brian Bourne Cutthroat. Excuse me. So it's kind of like a half Simic Flash, half Simic Ramp deck. And this kind of, I don't think I've run into Simic Ramp being tuned like this when I've been playing. Is this something that you've guys seen, or was this a bit of a surprise? And what are you thinking about it?
I haven't seen it, but I like it because I think what is the two mana Merfolk Flash one? The Brineborn
Brian
Cutthroat.
Bourne, yeah,
I think that, as we kind of brought up before, it kind of gets stumped by the cat decks, right? Because
mhm,
it can be a 2019 and it's never going to deal any damage.
yeah, sure.
And maybe this is a concession to, okay, we need to go over the top, so let's not even waste our turn two on leaving up that. We can Paradise Druid on turn two, and then turn three, we can Ambusher or Mystic or something even more powerful.
I like I like all the different ways the ramp deck were built. I'm looking at them now, and the Andrea Mengucci build kind of reminds me of my elf deck in the fact that it runs the Nisa into Finale of Devastation into End Razor Forerunners combo. I
Yeah,
always thought that was pretty
that's
cool
sweet.
and OP, but I didn't actually think somebody would play it in a competitive environment, especially such a high profile player.
Hmm.
And then we've got the other list, like Simone Rucutto is just running the casual list you would expect to people to run, but it's also running the quasi duplicate, which I honestly thought quasi duplicate was kind of memey, but seeing people run quasi duplicate into Agent of Treachery has kind of changed my mind a bit when it comes to that.
Yeah, it makes a believer out of you when that happens.
And then the last ramp deck kind of goes back to what we mentioned earlier about just how good Casualties of War is. So they're running black to run Casualties of War and Massacre Girl.
Which deck are you talking about right now, Steve?
Sultai ramp.
Oh, okay. I actually don't think I've checked that one out yet. Yeah, it seems like everyone's been trying to fit in Casualties of War, like we already talked about. So I guess any way to do that gives you an edge. I love that Andre's Forerunners in Andrea Mangucci's deck, though. I think that is, he's only got one copy, but that is pretty sweet. That he's basically playing like an Elementals deck when you look at it, because he's got the Risen Reef, Cavalier Thorns, Leafkin Druid package in there.
Yeah, well, the Leafkin Druids can definitely ramp you up to the finale of Devastation quite well.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And then Nissa too to get you there. 28 lands though. A lot. Oh, I've noticed a lot of people are. I don't want to say overdoing it on lands, but I think that's a concession to them knowing that not much aggro is going to be in here. Because like that Rakdos one you were talking about, running 26 lands, that didn't really totally seem necessary. But maybe when you know you're not going to be facing much aggro, you can afford to play it safer with that. I'm not sure.
Oh, I absolutely agree. If you take a quick scan at all the lists, not much of it just beats you in the face on turn one, two,
Yeah.
three.
Right. That Esper deck runs 27 lands too, which is like that deck isn't really even trying to ramp it too much. So like 27 lands on that one seems like a lot to me. And we were talking about that earlier. There's a lot of one-offs in there. It doesn't really have an identity, but he is the only person playing Esper, so maybe he knows something we don't. I don't know.
I like that Esper list. The only problem is it just doesn't have an identity, in my opinion. There's just too many one-ofs. It feels
Yeah,
like this
right.
guy is trying to prove something, or just trying to test something. But I mean, something appears to be here. I just don't know what.
Yeah. 27 lands when the highest mana cost is Bolas of Citadel. I wasn't, and then Bolas of Citadel. Once you play that, you don't even really need lands. I'm not. I don't totally understand the thought
That's another
process
thing.
behind
I
it.
hate having extra land in a deck that helps you go from the top.
Yeah,
And I understand this deck because I mean, Brian Braun-Duin's famous for playing a whole bunch of Esper, at least for the previous few years that I've watched him. And I watched him make Bolas Citadel work. And I gotta tell you, watching that dude use one life was just masterful, being down to one life. But the fact of the matter is that you've got Kenrith, and you need with getting Bolas Citadel on the board for 6 mana means you have 6 mana, so you most likely can deal with 10 life a turn. So having 27 lands means you're not going to be able to use that life as well as you probably want to.
right. Yeah, I totally agree with you there. I don't know, Nerdy Steve. You think is there someone we're missing here in this deck?
Well, in general, I actually think a lot of people tend to not play enough lands in their deck.
Okay.
And I think, like, when you're a control deck specifically, you never not want to miss a land drop. And so I think since a lot of these decks in general tend to be much more control oriented, that's why we're seeing a lot higher land count than we're expecting, or maybe we're used to.
Sure.
And it specifically because there is no aggro deck. But I think if you don't get your third or fourth land drop in any of these decks, it means you're not getting your fourth turn fires or your fourth turn anything. So all of these decks really, really need to make sure that they get their first 4 land drops. Otherwise, they just lose. And so I think that's one of the reasons why we're doing it. And in this deck, with Bolas' Citadel out, yeah, you're going to probably run into a lot of lands on top. But with Narset and Teferi and Kenrith, you're going to be able to control that pretty well.
Sure.
And I think Kenrith is very, very spicy with that too. Because you can always draw your top card if it's a land.
Yeah. Yeah, that is a good point. He's just running, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 one-offs in the main board, which I don't think I've, as far as I can remember, I don't think I've ever seen that in a tournament from this high level before.
Mm-hmm.
6 one-offs. And they're, I mean, it's like Disfigure, Duress, Despark, so they're kind of removal spells that do similar things, I guess, if you think of it that way. But do you guys think that's like him not being able to make up his mind on what's better, or him just thinking that works the best, or what?
I think partially maybe not knowing what you're expecting, but I think Narset's also kind of a tutor target in that way, and
Sure.
maybe instead of seeing a D-Spark and a Drowning Lock, or just seeing 2 D-Sparks on top of your deck, getting a choice between either of those might be better than not having that choice.
Yeah. Yeah, that does make sense. I
Well,
agree
the
with you there.
sideboard is also real wishy-washy. A lot of 1 and 2 ofs. But yeah, I think a lot of the cool thing about the main board is, a lot of it works well with Bolas Citadel. You're not just gonna like play like other than let's say Time Wipe. I mean, you could probably play Time Wipe and not be worried, but other than basically Dovin's Veto, you can pretty much just play all of it off the top. And that was a thing that I didn't like with the old Bolas Citadel. And maybe that's why he went with Drown in the Lock over that card that kills 3 mana or lower or bumps something back into your hand. Can't remember the name. But that card used to stop.
Tyrant Scorn.
Yeah, Tyrant Scorn used to get choked at the top of the deck a lot. And I think that's why they went with the Drown in the Lock, because it offered a little bit more versatility.
Sure. Yeah, and then Oath of Kaya and Elite Guard Mage are basically, you get to play those for nothing if you have Ballista Citadel out, so that's a good piece of tech too. But Elite Guard Mage is a wishy-washy card if just on its own for a 3-of. I don't know. I know a lot of people have mixed opinions on that, between that and Basilica Bellhaunt and all those things too.
Well, I feel like the only reason people aren't running Basilica Bellhaunt is because Mono Red isn't a thing.
Yeah.
This is the first tournament I have ever seen that doesn't have even one person
Not
playing
one.
Mono Red.
Yeah, I know. That is amazing. Yeah, only one aggro deck, too, which we might as well jump into that now, which is the Golgari, the Gruul aggro, which is, Gruul Adventure.
That was
It's like, it took such a hit from losing Once Upon a Time that I really am not sure that it's got what it takes. But I guess you can look at it in a way where, in a field where no one was really preparing for aggro, maybe it has an advantage that way because it's the only one.
Yeah, I feel sorry for this guy just because he's got no idea what's about to happen. Either he's going to wreck people or he's going to get destroyed. He just has no idea.
Yeah, exactly. And Cindervines is actually a pretty nice card against Fires of Invention in the sideboard. But I would have considered maybe running that main board because there's a lot of enchantments going around right now between Trail of Crumbs and Fires of Invention.
I just noticed a card in the sideboard I've never seen before. Emberth Shieldbreaker. Not bad.
No, Emberth is really, really good. I like Emberth.
There was whose deck? I was looking at it this morning. There was some card that was a common in Throne of Eldraine that I had literally never seen before, ever. That was in the sideboard, and it was called like Once in Future, I think, something like that. I don't even remember what it did. I had never seen it before, but I was like, oh, that's interesting. I had to figure out who was playing that now. I'm pretty sure that the card is called Once in Future.
The card that, if adamant, you return 2 cards from your graveyard to your hand.
Yeah, I've never seen anybody play that or like had it played against me or even noticed it before, to be honest. So interesting to see it in a Mythic Championship.
I think a lot of people are really keen to these enchantments and artifacts. So I've seen Return to Nature in a lot of sideboards that are green.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that is a pretty key card. And Disenchant, too, for anyone playing white. Not that there's that many people playing white, but Disenchant has been pretty key for me when I've been playing Esper, at least.
Wasn't that for enchantments only, or was that artifacts only?
It's artifacts, too.
I thought it was one or the other.
Yeah, artifact and enchantment.
Yeah,
for Disenchant.
Yeah, I thought so.
Oh,
yeah,
that's the 2-mana one. Okay, the one that I
yeah.
was thinking of was the 1-mana one. Okay.
Demystify is only enchantments.
Yeah, that was what I was thinking
If that is what you were thinking of.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's one more kind of really spicy deck that we haven't talked about yet, and that's Temur Adventure by John Emmanuel Depras. So this is the first adventure deck I've ever seen in competitive play that's not running Edgewall Innkeeper. It's just running the Lucky Clover. So a totally different take on the adventure strategy. And to be honest, I have no idea how this will play out. But is this one that you think is kind of janky and you just want to try something new, or is he onto something here from first glance?
It can work. I've seen the Lucky Clover decks. So one of the things when I played against these types of decks, I've actually found the Innkeeper to be one of their weakest cards because they get the advantage off the Lucky Clover, and the Innkeeper's usually a 1/1 for like 5 turns before they ever cast them off the adventure. But it's an interesting deck and a powerful when you get the Lucky Clovers. My thing is, whenever my opponent doesn't get Lucky Clover, I feel like I just win.
Sure.
I feel like this is almost an interesting take on the Izzet deck, actually. Because if you really look at it, if you get rid of some of these greed cards, which are just, I don't know, they're,
Beanstalk Giant is.
Yeah. I
Every
mean,
time I play
I
it,
feel like
felt
it's
very
running
slow,
green for the
so,
Hydroid Crisis, but
Yeah.
there's so much extra value. Like, if you get double Fae of Wishes, you get double Bone Crusher Giant, you can keep yourself in the game. And then you just kind of wreck face once you get to your Beanstalk Giant and your Hydroid Crisis. I think the only card that I don't like in this deck is the Escape for Wilds. And the main board, Return to Nature, seems weird to me, but obviously this guy must have did plenty of testing, otherwise he wouldn't have done that.
Yeah, John Emmanuel DePraz in the MPL2, and he was in the finals in the last arena tournament, so he's a good player. I actually don't dislike the main deck Return to Nature that much, to be honest. I think there's a lot of targets for it. Because I kind of feel like most games, if you have it in your sideboard, you will be sideboarding it in, just based on the percentages. So
Yeah.
it doesn't seem like the worst metagame call to me, but
I guess you're right. I mean, the exile target card from a graveyard is almost always relevant.
sure. Yeah, because
the-
that actually does work for. Sorry, Nerdy Steve, but that
No.
you can exile the cat too, if for some reason you don't want to destroy the oven. Maybe they have two ovens out.
I was gonna say the Return to Nature is interesting because I think it's a pretty playable main deck card because almost every deck has relevant enchantments and artifacts. But when you have Fae of Wishes in your main deck, I'm like, do you really need your sideboard card to also be main deck?
Yeah, that's a good point.
But maybe it's just you never have enough time, so maybe that's why it's relevant. But I don't know.
I think kind of the top end potential on this deck is to be able to copy Fae of Wishes like 2 or 3 times if you get Lucky Clover out, and then be able to get, Escape to the Wilds, maybe a Chandra, maybe a Plain White Celebration all in the same turn.
Hmm.
Drawing all those 3 cards in the same turn is pretty filthy, but it's a matter of can you actually get that off consistently. And yeah, go ahead.
No, and so I've played against this type of deck a lot, and it happens a lot, and it makes me cry. But sometimes it's always a very time-intensive deck. So if you, they only have a couple turns to do it, because if they granted for 3 cards from the sideboard, it means that they weren't doing anything except for Lucky Clovering the 2 turns before. So it's a deck that really punishes really slow and grindy decks.
Gotcha. Yeah. Okay.
I
And,
like
go
the
ahead.
Chandra's Awakened Inferno as well, because it gives you an extra win condition, and I like that.
Yeah. Yeah, that is true. And especially against grindy decks, like you were saying, that's the way to kind of outgrind someone if you can just keep +1ing over and over again.
And against, the Azorius decks, they can't counter Chandra.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, he is playing Shifting Ceratops too, so it looks like he actually had a lot of the flash decks in mind when building the sideboard. I'm not totally sure if all these sweepers are needed, like Ritual of Soot, but I guess you kind of have to put that in there just in case you're going up against aggro when you're building the deck. But since they're really, I don't know if there's an incredible amount of target, like Paradise Druid maybe is probably the big one that he's playing Ritual of Soot for, I would say. But
Are you looking at the right list?
oh no, I am looking at John Fires.
I was
I'm
gonna
sorry
say that.
about
I was
that.
like, I don't. Okay.
Yeah, no, I clicked on the wrong tab thinking it was that tab, and I was just looking at the sideboard. Yeah. Okay, so there's 2 types of Golgari Adventure decks. Stan Sifka is playing one, and then the other one is another Lucky Clover deck. So this is a good Lucky Clover segue into that one. But Ali Warfield and Autumn Burchett, and I think there's one other player playing the Lucky Clover Smitten Swordmaster combo deck, which is a deck I actually played back when Field of the Dead was a thing, and I thought it was pretty good then. But now I haven't seen it really in a while. But basically how this deck works is it kind of builds up to a 1-turn kill type of combo where you can have 1 or 2 Lucky Clovers out and 5 or 6 Knights out and then blast them with the Smitten Swordmaster and do, I think the most I ever did was 36 damage in 1 turn with this combo. So that was pretty awesome. Does it have a place here, do you think? I kind of think it does, thinking about it now, based off of what we were talking about earlier, how there isn't too much aggro. It might have some time to build that board state out and get some of the knights out.
Yeah, that's what because I used to play this too, like in a pre-field meta, and I mean, because I'm always a Golgari person at heart, so I've been playing these decks forever, and I think the Swordmaster version is good against maybe field and the cat decks because, or not field, the fire decks, because the fire decks aren't necessarily very, very quick. And they're not going to punish you Lucky Clovering the first couple of turns, and then you can Order of Midnight your Swordmaster, and then you can Swordmaster for 1 billion, and you're good. And you have Casualties of War, which is great against them.
So I've got a good friend. He's been on the podcast, Jamoki, and he played this deck way before it was popular, or even slightly popular. I honestly feel like he kind of made one of the prerequisites to this deck, and his version was just kind of improved upon. Like some of the improvements that I can see, Jamoki focused a lot more on the knight aspect, but I feel like this deck focused a little bit more on the meta aspect. Jamoki's deck doesn't really have the Casualties of War, and it doesn't have the Lovestruck Beast, but those two cards are so valuable to this deck on their own that I absolutely see why they're in this list.
Yeah. I feel bad now, Steve. I've pronounced his name Jamoke this whole time, and he never corrected me.
He's never corrected me, too, and I talk to him all the time.
So it's either or.
He doesn't care.
That's good to know. But yeah, I actually, he got me into this deck, too. He was playing it with Karn for a little bit, and I thought that was pretty interesting inclusion because that actually aged pretty well because Karn shuts down Witch's Oven, if you wanted to go that far. And he was playing it with the only 3 copies of Lucky Clover, and then you could get the 4th one from the sideboard with Karn. So that was pretty interesting, and I had a lot of fun playing that deck. But the like you were saying, adding copies like Lovestruck Beast does make a ton of sense here. So I like it. This is one of the decks I'm rooting for, actually. Probably my top 3.
Lovestruck Beast, that card just bothers me. It annoys the crap out of me because it can block. And the 4/4 haste dude with Death Touch, like, it feels so bad just getting that card on the board and then having to trade with a Lovestruck Beast that isn't even able to attack.
Yeah.
Oh, poor questing beast.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's one kind of big deck we haven't talked about yet, and that's the kind of the not Swordmaster Golgari adventure deck. I'm looking at Chris Kavartek's list right now. So kind of the strategy I'm seeing with this one is obviously you have your card engine with Edgewalling Keeper and all the adventure cards. But then he also has Rotting Registor and Vivian Arkbow Ranger in here, and the Great Henge. And these are cards that just didn't work when Oko was a thing that work now. Not Vivian, but the other two, the Rotting Registor and the Great Henge. So now they've been enabled again, and that can be a pretty solid combo, getting Rotting Registor with Trample down on it. This was probably the deck I think I actually am probably going to predict to win it, just because I thought this deck has always been in the picture, and it was not quite as good as Oko, but at least it was competitive against Oko in some ways, and now that Oko's out of there, it feels like to me it should be in a good place to kind of take off. And it's also one of the more popular decks out there. But what do you guys think? It's kind of a tried and tested strategy now that's been tweaked a little bit since Oko's gone.
If there's anything I've learned from running my own tournaments and basically just watching the Nerdy Steve play, never, ever count yourself out when you got a Great Henge. Because you top deck even that Paradise Druid right there, you will come back. I have seen the Nerdy Steve have 1 card in hand with like no cards on board, but boy does he have a Great Henge, and he manages to come back when the opponent's got like 10 card advantage.
Yeah.
So you're an expert on this one. Then,
yeah, I love the Great Henge. I like this deck a lot. I think Vivian's really, really good against other, again, the cat sacrifice decks and stuff like that, because she just gives your stuff trample and then you don't have to worry about anything. And she's also really good here against specific fire builds too, because with Questing Beast and Rotting Regisaur, your stuff is always going to be a threat and could almost always kill your opponents like Cavaliers or Kenrith that they leave back. So I think this is really, really good. And again, as Steve said, the Great Henge is a really, really good card here. And I don't think, and once you get this out, and because you have Questing Beast and Lovestruck Beast and Rotting Regisaur, it's always going to be very, very cheap.
Yeah.
So that's going to be really, really good.
Yeah, great point there. Because with Rotting Regisaur, it's only 2 green mana to get the Henge out, and that's pretty insane. Just paying 2 mana for that card. Is this basically the deck that you won the tournament with, Steve, or did you use a different version?
I think maybe the first week, this was very similar to the one that I've used, but I've been running. My deck isn't even up here in any of the lists, but I run a combination of a cat sacrifice deck and a black-green adventure deck.
Gotcha.
But I really like this deck, and this might have reawakened my love for the Great Henge.
There you go. Well, Chris Kavartek is a beast. He's had a insanely good year so far, and he's been playing Golgari Adventure for a while too. So I think he knows the deck really well. So he's definitely someone to look out for this weekend. I think he's pretty well positioned. All right, is there anything else you guys any decks I missed you guys wanted to touch on?
I'd like to say just pay attention to some of the lists from the Team Aether tourney. There's a lot of people playing a lot of interesting lists out there. So, and plus we kind of gave the prerequisite to the current Oko list meta, because we did 2 tournaments before Oko was banned. And gotta be no shocker here, but some of the lists that are here today were the lists that won our tournament 2 weeks before.
Yeah, it's an awesome tournament, and you're doing another one this Saturday, right, Steve? So,
every week, 10,000 gems on the line.
So you can have the Mythic Championship up on one TV, and you can be playing your tournament on the other one.
Mm-hmm.
The Aether tournaments are awesome. Unfortunately, I've only got to play in one. I went 0-2, but it happens. Maybe
not
next
to me
time.
yet, so.
Well, Nerdy Steve here just showed up one week, he won, and then he showed up the next week, and then he got second, and then he showed up the next week, and then he won, and then this dude's a force to be reckoned with. I played 30 of my own tournaments, and I've only won 2.
Yeah, the deck I was playing is not even close to being up on this list either. I was playing a version of Esper Stacks. I guess Esper Stacks just isn't good enough to make it. Now we know.
Not since it came out.
Yeah. Yeah, I was playing it with Mizzet Reborn, which I thought was a pretty cool piece of tech in there. But it just worked a lot for me on ladder as far as I've ever climbed. But unfortunately, it's got steamrolled in the tournament, but that's all right.
Yeah.
I'll have my comeuppance one
Every
weekend.
week, I decide to go either serious or not serious.
Yeah.
And usually I go 4-3, 5-2 when I play my serious decks. 2-3 weeks ago, I played the Izzet Flash, and I went 5-2. And then last week, I decided to go with something real janky. And then the week before that, I went with Divine Visitation janky deck. And I think in the last 2 weeks, I've got a combined 2 wins if you don't count buys. So.
But one of these days you're going to win it all with one of those. And
No, that's not happening.
No, I have faith.
They're jank for a reason. The consistency is just not there.
I actually just realized we forgot to mention the 5-color Niv Mizzet Fires decks in this tournament, though.
I was actually going to bring up, when you talked about interesting ones, I was like, there's actually a deck that makes me feel stuff. And it's the Niv Mizzet 5-color Fires one.
Oh,
I don't know what it makes me feel.
I love the balls on this person. I mean,
right?
playing Niv Mizzet in the modern meta is absolutely insane.
They're both totally different. The two, because Ken Yukihiro is known for doing wild stuff, but the two that are submitted are significantly different strategies considering.
Right?
I think so.
I can't even comprehend them.
Yeah. I think you were mentioning this on your stream, Steve. I really do not understand the Tulsa Mirror in the sideboard. I guess that was in case mono red was a thing. But other than that, I'm all in on this deck. 4 copies of Casualties of War too,
Yeah,
which you can find with Niv Mizzet.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Niv Mizzet. I got 4 decks that I do for my viewer duels on Monday, and all of them are just great because you've played everything in your hand, then you drop your Niv Mizzet, then you fill your hand again. I think my version is just like, or all 4 of mine are a little bit more ridiculous because I've got a whole bunch of one-ofs that are covering the 2-color combos a little bit more. So every time I drop Niv Mizzet, I'm guaranteed to draw like 5-6 cards.
Yeah, it's pretty insane. You should try my Esper Stacks list. I'll send it over to you because you don't even need to run green-red mana because Guild Globe and Golden Egg basically enable Niv Mizzet to be played. And then you can usually draw your Dance of the Manth or Doom Foretold with it. So it's pretty good. It's a blast to play, too. But yeah, Ken Yukihiro is always coming up with something crazy, and I love that about him. So he nailed it last time with the Rotting Regisaur Embercleave deck, the Knights deck, and hopefully he'll nail it this time. You never know. Do you guys want to give some predictions before we wrap this up?
I think I'm just going to have to go with one of the Jund sacrifice lists. And I think it's probably going to be the Brian Braunduin list.
Okay. Yeah, he's a great player. He's actually probably, I don't know if I should say this in case it doesn't happen, but I think he's coming on the podcast next week. So that'll be a pretty cool interview to get him, especially if he wins.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I think he'll probably get second. I think one of these lists out here is going to shock everybody. I just don't know what it is. But I don't think it's going to be Jeskai Fires. I think people have had too much practice against that deck. I think it's going to be one of these one-ofs. People are, because these one-of decks, it's got the shock factor to it, so people aren't as prepared for them. And plus, the one-ofs, I'm sure, are great. That you got really good people playing them, so they've practiced against all these other decks. Well, they haven't practiced against the one-of deck.
That's true. I'll send this one over to you, Nerdy Steve, before I give mine.
I think I was really surprised by the Simic ramp decks, and I wasn't surprised if Andrea Mengucci wins. I think it's pretty well positioned, and I think it is new enough where people need to. I mean, it can potentially get like a 3rd turn Nissa, and any deck that can do that, I just am jealous of. So
yeah, and he's also been one of these guys that's had a great 2019. He's been killing it recently and nailing his deck choices too. So for me, I think I'm going to go with this Jund Fires deck. I actually feel bad because I don't know Elizabeth Rice. I'm not totally sure who she is, but I love her deck choice. So this is more of a rooting for than an actual think it's going to win type prediction, which is what I did last time, and the deck I predicted went 0-4. But we're going to change it this time, Elizabeth. I'm rooting for you, and
I have faith.
Bring home this bacon.
The only reason why I think this list is not going to win is just because Clarion kills all the biogenic ooze before they become a thing.
Yeah. You can sideboard that out, and then I guess you got you don't really have a great replacement for that post sideboard shifting Ceratopsin. Or no, I guess you probably have a different plan for Fires of Invention. So Return to Nature is one that comes to mind. It's just I just think it's a really cool deck, and I'm looking forward to making it right after we wrap up here. But yeah, this was a fun time, guys. Make sure to check out these Aether Hub tournaments coming up this weekend and every single weekend. Anything you guys want to say before signing off?
Thank you for having me. This was fun.
Yeah, anytime.
I appreciate it too, man.
Yep. All right, guys. Appreciate it. And good luck with the rest of your stream, Steve.
Oh, I was just going to do the podcast today.
Fair enough. Then this is an easy night.
Yeah.
All right, take it easy, guys.
All right, see ya. Well, anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed today's stream. I will obviously be uploading this to YouTube somewhere in the middle of next week, I would assume, just because I'm so lazy at uploading videos over the weekend. I'm obviously the podcast itself is going to be uploaded on the Mythic Rare podcast wherever he uploads those. Obviously, you won't be able to see my beautiful face just because of the fact that Skype isn't going to take my camera when the stream is already using the camera. But that's all right. It's no big deal to me. Anyways, thank you guys for sticking around. I appreciate it very much. I will be sending everybody off to... I do not know. Let's go ahead and see who's streaming right now. We have got... Sure, we'll send everybody over to Adamant.